Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Fireside Chat with Chris and Ivan, overviewing key highlights from the 2023 SANS SOC Survey. Before we get started, we have a couple of housekeeping items to go over. First, this webinar is being recorded, and we will send out the replay link in a follow-up thank you email. And finally, questions are always welcome. We encourage everyone to post their question in the comments section. I'd like to introduce our special guest, Chris Crowley, who is the SANS Senior Instructor, and Ivan Salles, who is the Director of SOC Initiatives at Trend. Without further delay, let's get started. Take it away, Ivan.
Okay, Alex, thank you so much for this beautiful introduction. I'm super happy. Before we start, honestly, I have to share something here. For the last 3 or 4 years or so, every time that I have a chance, I stop everything to watch Chris talking. Chris is a really very known public speaker, and especially when he's talking in the internet, I had a chance to stop everything to learn something from him. And I'm super happy. And honestly, I had no regrets. So I'm super happy to have you here, Chris. Thank you so much for your time, for attending our invitation. Yeah, very welcome.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm honored to be here. Appreciate you taking the time and inviting me and giving me an opportunity to talk about stuff that I'm interested in talking about. So that's kind of fun. Yeah.
All right. All right. So yeah, we are going to talk today about the results of the last SANS 2023 SOC survey. That's, if I'm not wrong, that's the 6th or 7th year in a row that you are running this study, right?
7th. Yeah, it's the 7th.
7th.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 7th one. Yeah. And I put here in one slide the key findings, Chris, from this last study that I would like to start our chats, right? But before we start effectively, I would like to greetings our audience here and say some words. First of all, this is a really free space, right? So we are really like to host this kind of educational series here in Trend and to have a space to talk freely about SOC operations. That's not a product focused webinar. We have other incredible spaces to talk for products and our beautiful features. But now the idea to explore more what the companies are doing and which challenge they are facing regarding the SOC and security operation things. And I really believe that this study can reveal many things, right? So regarding the dynamic of this session, we will be, first of all, we are going through the key findings in one slide that I will project here. And then we will jump in the study itself to pick some more specific points to explore. Okay, Chris?
Yeah, it sounds good to me. And
Sounds good.
and I just want to echo it too, for those of you who are attending and listening, as I'm talking about stuff and as Ivan and I are talking about stuff, please put questions in and we'll try to address them sort of in the stream. A lot of times people they wait until the end to ask the question, but it might be easier for you to ask the question and then me answer it right at that moment in time. It probably would make more sense. So feel free to ask questions as we go.
Okay, let's go to the key findings from the study. Before start, Chris, I put everything together here, but which one of them surprised you the most?
It's kind of an interesting thing. The surprising stuff to me is often around metrics. It's a thing where it's like, I'm surprised that I don't see 100% of the people saying, yeah, we had metrics that were reported. To be quite honest, that's the one that I always look at that and I'm like, how is that? How is that not it? Another thing that I get a little surprised about is some of the technology but it's not exactly a key finding, but we'll get into maybe a little bit of the discussion around the technology. A positive surprise for me, though, is the focus that people seem to be putting on SOAR as an orchestration automation thing. And I know that we'll talk about that a bit, but that's sort of like a positive thing that I feel like people have embraced that as a concept.
Yeah, one point about the SOAR that you mentioned. Yeah, the SOAR sounds to me like the tool that can solve all problems. The time by time we have some tools that people are relying to try to solve many problems, and that what was calling my attention here was people rely on the SOAR at the beginning. Basically, was my first thoughts. To reduce the number of staffing, right? But in fact, the results is revealing the different thing, right?
Basically, the deal is that the SOAR is definitely not eliminating staff. And another thing is, and it kind of shows up in the responses, but we also ask like follow-on questions of specific people, and something else that came out, it doesn't even necessarily make people faster in their response. What SOAR seems to be doing is that it is making it so that the performance of work is more consistent, so that there's a quality of performance where it's like you're doing the same level of performance every time, which quite honestly is actually hard to do in cybersecurity operations when you're dealing with uncertainty and novel things and not necessarily having the same entry the same way, even though it is the same sort of case that you're working. Okay, so it's not making people faster. It's not eliminating staff. What it's doing is it's making it so that consistency is improved. But here's one other thing that came out. And again, it's not exactly in the survey responses, but it is in like some of the follow-on questions that we asked for people. One thing that it's actually doing is it's providing stress relief for staff members where they don't feel like all that they're doing is like copying and pasting between the SIM and the XD. Back and forth, and the ticketing system and the 3 different ticketing systems that they have to deal with. It's like relieving the tedium. Excuse me. It's relieving the tedious tasks that people have to do all the time. And if I can say one more thing about this SOAR is a lot of people are embracing this from a technology perspective, which is fine, but I do have to say that SOAR as a technology really is just a wrapper around scripting. And as someone who in my career has spent a lot of time scripting stuff, it's kind of like people finally realized, oh, we should script these things in the Cybersecurity Operations Center, but they never really embraced the, oh, well, we can just do it ourselves, like as a DIY, let's just script it, because not everybody has that scripting capability. What they embraced was that, okay, we have this tool where, Ivan, who's the really smart person who knows the scripting, can actually take care of some of the customization stuff, but this thing's basically packaging all of these scripts for us. And it's to me, I thought it was obvious to people that, like, yeah, you need to take your routines and turn them into scripts and write that. But it wasn't until there was a technology that was specifically focused on the cybersecurity application of that make your routine a script that people started to embrace that. So it's interesting. I mean, maybe I'm a little bit cynical, but I feel like it's interesting that it took the technology to make people start to do it. So.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And at the same time, I can see something that I have a chance to see in another studies. One of them is about outsourcing services that we are
Mm.
going to talk a little bit more scoping
Mhm.
in when we are go deeper in the study
Mhm.
itself. But outsourcing, some of the find where the pen testing and forensic are still the top activities, right?
Consistent for the last several years, pen testing, forensic analysis, and threat intelligence. And we kind of ask it a bunch of different ways, but those things tend to be outsourced. And that has been the case for years and years. That's those are the top answers. I can talk a little bit more about that, but yeah, let's hold on to that to delve into the details. But there's actually something else that I want to say about that. There's an interesting crosstab that I don't think I'm going to have time from the study to get into, but what we actually looked at was for the stuff that is highest in its likelihood of being outsourced, it's actually lowest in the ranking of the capabilities of what people do. And so I just want to highlight that point here because I'm not going to have an opportunity to talk about it later, just in the interest of time. But the way that it ends up is, and you can go look at the report itself, and it shows a ranking of the top outsourced versus a ranking of the top capabilities done. And kind of the way that this plays out is if you do pen testing and forensics via your SOC capability, you're likely to outsource it. And if you don't outsource it, you probably don't do it at all. Is pretty much what's happening. And as an aspect of that, I think that it's just simply a resource constraint, that it happens or it doesn't happen, and that's just the way that it ends up playing out. But you usually don't have the expertise on hand in the SOC, so you do outsource that expertise and then use it kind of only when you really need it. From that perspective,
and maybe it makes sense also to see that some other statistics here that 9% only of the tax incidents are being doing through the threat hunting activity, right? So maybe people don't have this specialists in their teams to do that, or that's maybe the reason.
Yeah. So let me share my thoughts on that. I actually was just having a conversation with several peers about this yesterday for another thing that I'm doing. And we started talking about threat hunting, and we started talking about threat hunting from the concept of, is threat hunting something where you have a specialist who is a threat hunter, or is threat hunting a thing that everybody does? Okay. And I want to talk about my opinion. So I really try to be very sort of clear about which of these things are my opinion and which of these things are in the survey responses specifically. This is not in the survey responses. This is Chris's opinion about how people can run cybersecurity operations well. A lot of people think about threat hunting in ways that I think it's not a good way to think about it. The first thing that people think about for threat hunting that I think is not a good way is they basically say, okay, here's a new indicator. I'm going to go search in historical data and see if we have that. I think you should do that, but I think that you should turn that into an operational task. And I really don't think that crosses the threshold of threat hunting. I think that I call that historical or retroactive analysis. I know what I'm looking for and I go look historically for it. I think you should do it, but I don't consider that threat hunting. The second thing that people think about with threat hunting is they think about having specialists and only specialists for threat hunting. I would like to also have threat hunter specialists, but I don't want to wait until I can afford to have threat hunter specialists to start threat hunting. And here's what I think about threat hunting. So getting into the what you should do. Everybody in the SOC looks at the tools that are supposed to be sending off alerts saying, hey, there's a problem here, there's a problem here. Everybody looks at that and they know in some way that tool the alerting tool, is broken. And what I would like each individual to have is some amount of time. And I don't know exactly the right amount of time. It's probably not 50% of their time. It's probably not 2% of their time, right? It's probably at the start, call it 10% of their time. So if you work a 40-hour week, that means 4 hours. Maybe you can't afford 4 hours at first, so 2 hours, but some block of time where that person has a dedicated task of threat hunting, which is forget about the alerts. Yeah, the alerts will be there when you come back to it after taking this time. And you are going to intentionally review data in a way that presumes the alerting's failed, and we're going to look for stuff. And again, I have a lot more sort of guidance on exactly what format that should take. But this 10% of 9% detecting incidents via proactive threat hunting, detecting incidents in my sort of paradigm is only one of the things that threat hunting actually does for you. Another thing that threat hunting does for you that is really useful and valuable is that you end up improving the hygiene of the environment. You end up with posture improvement because you're spending time looking at stuff and you're like, whoa, there's a misconfiguration on this host. Like we need to address that. There's some things where it's like, I was looking for invalid logons, and then I found this thing where these accounts don't have two-factor enabled, but they should have two-factor enabled. And that's not detecting an incident per se, but that's improving the posture of the environment through proactive threat hunting. And then another benefit that you get out of threat hunting that not a lot of people acknowledge, and quite honestly, I don't have it in here of asking the question, but it's you get ideas about how to engineer detections. So you want to call it use case development, or you want to call it detection engineering, or whatever. But we kind of start with these ad hoc things where we try it in the threat hunt, and I'm not burdened by the requirement of having a good detection engineering task. I can just go be, fast and try something. And then I say, should I be doing this on the regular? If so, then I basically, without burdening the actual threat hunt, I just basically have an outcome of like, this would be a good idea for a use case. And so this can become a pipeline. And that's not in this 9% either, but that's tremendous value. That actually is your workflow, your pipeline, your research and development, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. One point, Chris,
get started with.
Sorry to interrupt you. One point that you mentioned that it's I think that the AI can play an important role, honestly, that I could see in the past, I don't know, 6 months from now, that some vendors, and Trend is one of them, start to use the AI as a tool that the SOC analyst can use to start to do some threat hunting, because sometimes they lack some more deeper understanding about the tools that they are using, honestly, right? But they can ask in a more free way, using the natural language, right? So, and then I can see that AI can be, for now and for future especially, a good friend to democratize this kind of activity for other teams, right? Not for threat hunting or dedicated threat hunting anymore.
Let me talk about AI a little bit. I'm gonna start with one thing. I'm not gonna pull it up, and maybe I get a chance to get to it later. AI is at the bottom of the technology satisfaction right now in this year's survey, at the bottom. Okay. People in a SOC, in cybersecurity operations, whether you're technically a SOC or just doing SecOps or whatever, I don't think that they have a lot of happiness with AI right now. And I have to tell you, I don't think that the large language models, and ChatGPT is a good example of this. I don't think that that's going to solve any real problems for analysts in the SOC right now.
Right now.
I do think that there are some things that AI can do for us. I'm going to talk about them in a second. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about what LLMs, ChatGPT, and that sort of stuff can actually do to help us right now. And probably the best thing that you could use it for right now is basically in the tasks that you do regularly, leverage one of the LLMs to basically do a, hey, write me a PowerShell script that does X. And you have to give it these tiny little things. Write me a subroutine in Python that takes these parameters and does this thing. And then you don't have to write the whole thing, but you kind of cobble it together from the LLM to do that. Another thing that would be useful, and I'm suggesting some things here that you might not want to let a third party have access to this. So just, of course, using appropriate OPSEC of like, is it appropriate to share this? But this next thing that I'm about to suggest, really, you have to have good OPSEC and decide, is this appropriate or not? But imagine taking your quick write-up on a circumstance and say, hey, large language model utility, right? Whatever. Can you rewrite this to make this a little bit more understandable? And give it the text and have it give you that kind of like enhancement, and then you take that and revise it. Like, I think that would be a useful kind of application of it.
Yeah, that's exactly the point, Chris, that I think that AI can be useful, for SOC analysts, not for replace any other thing that they're doing now, but maybe to fill those gaps, right? And maybe to make fast some activity that they are struggling right now.
Yeah. Can I suggest two other applications that I think vendors are actually going to start to integrate effectively in using artificial intelligence inside of cybersecurity vendor provided tools? Okay. So the first one is actually within the SOAR, and I'm seeing this in different places. I think that the SOAR tools, and it doesn't have to be SOAR per se, you could do this in an XDR, you could do this in a SIM, you could do this in a SOAR. I think that these tools are going to start to nudge analysts with suggestions of, here's something that we saw the analyst do previously. Maybe it was me as the analyst, maybe it was one of the other analysts, but the machine learning is actually going to be a construct of, well, the last time Chris worked a ticket that was like this, Chris went and pulled this data, and now the machine learning, the SOAR tool or the SIM or the whichever, basically says, well, why don't I just go pull that data for the analyst? Because the analyst, a different analyst, the last time they were working a ticket that was like this, they needed that data to address the problem. And that actually, from a machine learning perspective, is tenable. So that's one area that I think that this is going to happen. The other area that I actually really see this being worthwhile is actually processing data to look for outliers. And there are different ways to approach this, but let me give you an example that comes from some of the work that Dave Holzer is doing in this space. Dave Holzer, another guy at SANS Institute, he actually wrote using I guess it was PyTorch or whatever. But so he wrote a detection that was a classifier. And the classifier basically says, here are a bunch of protocols for network traffic. And it classifies protocols where it's like, this is FTP, this is Telnet, this is HTTPS, and so he's got this classifier. And the way that this is specifically useful right now, but it's going to be useful for SOC analysts, is the classifiers like 99.999% effective on stuff that we already know about.
Mm-hmm.
So when the classifier doesn't achieve 99.999% classification of this is HTTPS protocol, all of a sudden that's interesting to an analyst because it's an outlier, because it does not conform to the classifier's prediction or assessment, not prediction, but assessment of it being a specific protocol. Wouldn't you want to know about that? Like if I feed it millions of connections that this is what it looks like in my environment, and I train it on that data set of this is what it looks like in my environment, and then we have a circumstance where there's something in my environment that all of a sudden it doesn't look like anything else that I see in my environment. Don't you want to know about that network connection as a start for you to go and investigate? Like, that's the sort of stuff that I actually think is going to be really useful. There's something I just want to point out. Somebody said in the question and answer that the chat is disabled.
Is that disabled to them? Yeah.
Yeah, but that's okay. Just you can just ask it in the question. So,
Yeah.
so that's where where it's gonna work. Yeah.
We have a question from Giuseppe Fontanelli. One question: Would you have a list of key top 10 SOC indicator metrics that could be shared with them?
Yeah. So that's actually a good one. There's a talk that Carson Zimmerman and I co-wrote. And Carson actually gave the presentation at first, the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams. And actually, I'm going to put in a link real quick that I think will get you to it. First PDF. I just put that in the chat. I think that is the link that will get you to the PDF of that particular. I'm typing that off the top of my head, so hopefully it gets you to the right. So that's the list of like the top 10 sort of between Carson Zimmerman and I. If you don't know Carson Zimmerman, he wrote the original MITRE top 10 strategies of a world-class cybersecurity operations center. And then also he just again, he left MITRE and went to Microsoft, but now he just wrote the co-authored the 11, because they're like, but this one goes to 11, like Spinal Tap reference. So, and this is I'm actually going to be at the panel that Carson's doing at the Blue Team Village at DEF CON later this year. So this is, it's kind of like us talking about the stuff that we've talked about before, but it's a really good reference point for metrics. But then sorry, just one last thing on the metrics for that question.
Please.
For this in the SOC survey, there is these are the metrics that people tend to use. So the survey link, which is in the chat, you can download that one too. And this is what people are doing for metrics.
Chris, my suggestion now is to jump to the more specific areas of the study itself.
Yeah.
If you can, I will stop share my screen here for a second.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then if you can share your screen, do you have the study with you?
Yeah,
I have it here.
I've got it. I've got it here. Let me just make sure I'm not jumping to my email or something as I share it with the world.
All right.
Okay, that's the right window, right? So you should see the one where it says key challenges.
The key challenge is one of the things that I believe that
okay.
I personally I would cover today, because I can see people struggling or facing so many barriers when they are implementing first time the SOC in their companies, or when they are I would say trying to transform their SOC, and the study can reveal something.
So let me I want to really briefly, because I didn't really talk about it, the survey itself. We said we've been doing it for 7 years or whatever. There are several hundred people who respond to it every year. And if you didn't respond to it this year and you do work in a SOC, please respond to it next year. Because one of the things that I've noticed that people do, and people tell me this every year afterwards, is they basically use this to help to set their tasks for the next 6 to 12 months. And it's something that a lot of people look at this and they say, okay, this is something that I went to my management and I was able to justify doing X, getting new technology, being able to hire people, do these things, right? So this is your peers in cybersecurity operations looking at the stuff that they're doing and then sharing it with one another in a way that it's like people generally trust the SANS Institute. And, it's like, and they share information. Also, I just want to say people take almost an hour on average to answer all the questions in this. And it's not like it's a 5-question survey. This is like, we've got 60,
45.
Yeah. We've got like 60 questions for you with like, some of them have like 40 or 50 subparts. There's one thing where just on the technology section, it says, this is going to take you more time. Are you willing to do it? Because it's going to take you 15 minutes just to answer these 2 questions. So it's like amazing how much information people are sharing. So it's really useful. And so the idea here is from the key challenges, we ask people like, what are the barriers that you have in terms of the things that are difficult for you in cybersecurity operations? So we asked, what's the greatest challenge? And the greatest response to that was lack of context related to what we're seeing. And to me, this is just absolutely fascinating, because what it says is you don't know what you're defending. You don't know what you're defending. And let me characterize this a little bit further. This is the thing where it's like you just got an alert, and this is an example, right? So it's not every single case, but an example. You just got an alert where your network intrusion detection, web proxy, whatever, says this was a malicious website that computer just went to. And so now as a SOC analyst, what you need to do is you say, okay, well, what's the reputation of that website? You go and find some stuff, threat intelligence, domain reputation, whatever. And you're like, well, that's not really conclusive. Then what you have to do is you have to go and look who's connecting to this. Who's this person that's connecting to this website? And then a lot of times what you have to do is you have to like contact the person and ask them, why did you go to this website?
Is that expected or not? It's malicious or not?
Right. Is this normal? Is this what did you mean to do this?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Is this part of your job? And like, maybe as a security analyst, you're like doing some background research and you're asking the person. Now, I want to take this back to what we just talked about in terms of SOAR. People like SOAR. Imagine if instead of you having to do all that stuff, basically, it went and gathered the information on the asset, pulled the asset information, said this person's a developer, right? And this is what they do, and this is where they're based, and this is the information about them, and this is their behavior of how many times they go to risky websites. Because just imagine if it presented to you that like this individual goes to risky websites all the time. Now, maybe that's like okay and part of their job, or maybe they're just a bad employee and they're causing risk.
Let me tag this user like okay, that's a risky user, right?
But so why am I as a SOC analyst developing the context on the fly? But this is what we're doing. This is what the survey is saying that we're complaining about as a challenge. It's like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. I don't know what this host is. I don't know what the asset is. I don't know what that server is. I don't know who these people are. And why not? And the why not, quite honestly, is we have not set it up for ourselves that we have this asset collection characterization as a mandate of what we need in order to do our work. And we're probably not capturing it in knowledge management. We don't have a thing where like, if I look at it one time, I can actually now tag this asset and I'm able to just like tag it in the SIM and all of a sudden the stuff's there. I don't have the information from the I don't know, some sort of
the inventory.
well, asset inventory, but I was actually thinking
You know?
more like I was thinking more to like some 802.1x authentication challenge where like to get onto the network that we have that integrated where it's like, okay, well, that person authenticated, so I know who they are. You know, it's like all of this sort of characterization stuff, the data is probably there in your network. You're just not using it well. And sometimes it is the case where I personally, you know, I'm a consultant. Like I teach for the SANS Institute. I do consulting. I do teaching on my own outside of SANS Institute. I do this sort of research. I do talks for a lot of different places, but I deal with MSSPs a bunch. This is like one of my consistent customers as a type of customer are MSSPs. And so the managed security service provider, they're like, I have no idea what this customer's asset is. I have to go then tell the customer you need to do this. And MSSPs are frequently asking me the question, how do I improve hygiene on my customers' computers when I don't control that endpoint? When I can't force them to change their behavior, how do I get them to change their behavior?
Yeah.
Right. And so
many,
this goes
many silos to manage, right? That's the issue.
Well, it's silos, but it's also just like, this is a little bit manipulative, but like, how do I entice them to do what they should do? It's kind of like, how do I get a child to take medicine when the child doesn't want to take medicine, even though it'll make them feel better from that? You know, like, how do I coerce this child into having that better behavior? And again, I'm going to answer this for the generic answer that I give to the MSSPs is metrics are fine. You can report stuff all day long and they'll just ignore it. Like, metrics are fine. You should do it anyway. But you know what's really going to make them change their behavior is if you write the instructions on how to change their behavior and then walk them through doing it better one time, not with the person that you report the ticket to, but with that person plus the IT person who actually has the responsibility to do it, and show them how to do their job. I said literally, if you basically retrain that person on how they should do their job, they're not going to do it the first time, but then it's like, it's going to kind of sink in. And it becomes this, like, you have to, I call it evangelize, and sometimes people don't like that word, but whatever you want to call it, essentially like make it so that you're just imprinting the good behaviors on them by showing them this is the more efficient approach to doing your work. And that's way outside of the reach, actually, for a lot of SOCs, but it's how you get better on the long term. And you change the behavior of those entities, either that you're servicing or that you are working with from that perspective. So,
fantastic.
Yeah.
Look, Chris, I would like to cover another part of the study.
Oh yeah, let's go.
It's a little bit going down here.
Yeah.
It's about the scoping. It's more about, because many times I see people talking, okay, I have some of those activities in my company, but I really don't know if I have a SOC, right? I know it's looks like a super basic, but in fact, it's not, because I can see that's a really important thing to do, right? So scope what my SOC is prepared to do, what I'm proposing to do in terms of what I'm willing to do in terms of or in my own organization as a department or tool that can help to mitigate the risk of the company, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is, I think, a legitimate question. What does it take to get to the point where you actually can say that you are a SOC? Right. This is an important aspect of this. And actually, I'm looking at this. This is an older version of it. I think that they've corrected the graphic to actually have it sorted the correct way. But there are a bunch of things that are in there that are done. And it's sort of like the the high points on this in terms of the stuff, what they basically what they look at. And so it's alerting and triage. This is a very important one. So I'm just going to sort of, and we would take that kind of for granted that a SOC does alerting and triage and monitoring and ingestion of data. But I think that that's fair. That's absolutely part of what we do. Another thing that's very, very high on the list is the idea of doing a essentially architecture engineering type work on the security controls that are in place in the organization. The SOC is essentially the expert level guidance for the organization on what sort of security controls they need to have in place. And without somebody saying like, oh no, you cannot release that new workstation or that new application without having these security controls in place. And these are the ones that you implement. And this is the tool, and we've already licensed it. And this is the XDR that you use. Somebody is the authority on that, and that's absolutely a responsibility of what the SOC must do. Another part of it, and this is something that people will argue about this, is incident response. Now, some people say, well, we have a different team that does incident response. And my take on that is like, okay, what that means is you call your monitoring capability the SOC, and you call your incident response, but you do it as part of your security operations. So if you have another team, you do it. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't really want to split the hair of whether it's like, this is my SOC and this is my incident response. If your organization does it, you do it.
But maybe it's caused by the market itself, because I can see people calling the MDR, everything regarding SOC now is MDR, right? So, but in fact, we have other parts that make part of the ecosystem, right? So maybe.
So, and I mean, I think that getting to saying the MDR as opposed to the EDR or the XDR is an interesting thing, because MDR, managed detection and response, having an endpoint control software that's cybersecurity specific to be able to do detection and response on endpoints, I think is important. And actually, I don't know, can I switch to it now, or I go to the technology thing to talk about that, to dovetail off of it? Sorry, I have to scroll down. But I can't remember exactly where it is. But down here, there's a technology section where we talk about the satisfaction of technology. And sorry, there are a lot of charts and there's a lot of stuff in here about this.
Maybe it's here, right?
Yeah, it's this one. So here at the top of the list, from a satisfaction, host, endpoint, or extended detection and response.
Honestly, I have to confess that I'm surprised and happy at the same time. To see the first time the XDR or the in the top of the technology, and I'm really happy to see that. In the same time, I wanted to understand why people are choosing XDR as a tool instead to keeping using other traditional technology for SOCs like a SIEM or other technology, right?
Yeah. So again, just for me to be fair, the survey says this is at the top. The why it's at the top isn't exactly in the survey. There is something else that's in here, and I'm not going to change to that chart. But there is another chart that crosswalks the reported how far it got in production, whether it was a full production deployment or not. And it's not a causal relationship, and I can't track that out, but there is certainly a relationship that part of what people are saying is they get EDR or XDR deployed. It tends to get deployed to most of the systems. So that's a positive. And I see that the things that tend to be more highly rated also tend to be more full production deployment. Okay, so I can't say that one causes the other, but I can say that I see this higher and this higher in a lot of the stuff that's there. Okay,
Yeah.
And then the other part of why I think that this is a high satisfaction for the EXDR category is it has a lot of data available. The tools tend to be good at letting the analyst query through data. And this is, I think, the crux of why the satisfaction is high on the analysts. It lets the analyst do analysis, plus it actually is preventive. So it's like having the mix of, I can actually have this tool be preventive. I can have it be responsive. So if it prevented it and just took care of it, great. But if it didn't just take care of it, and I can use the same tool for looking at the stuff and having it intervene at the direction of the analyst, analysts like that. Why? Because analysts need to make sense of a lot of complicated information. And if the analyst is trying to make sense of complicated information, and then they have to use that complicated analysis from one tool and then go do something in a different tool, analysts don't like that, because now they're being forced to context switch and they're being forced to adapt to a different tool and copy and paste and move the things. But the EDR is both that investigation and enforcement in the same place. And this is what analysts want. They don't want something that hides the details from them. They want something that lets them look into the details as much as they need to. And then if I want to kill that process, I want to just be like, oh, that's the process, kill it. And I think that that's the sweet spot for a lot of analysts, is it's like automation. Not automation, prevention, where the tool's capable of the confidence, but then interaction with the analyst, where the tool's not capable of having the confidence, saying, I don't know, you take a look at it, you're the analyst. And then when the analyst decides, like, yeah, that's the problem, I can just take care of it all right there. And this is my opinion. That's an
interesting point. Because
there.
And last July 3rd, we launched a new version of our XDR solution, including now the endpoint protection. That's exactly what you are commenting right now. So that's interesting, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we are providing the two things in the same package, right?
Yeah, I think that's what analysts want. And in talking to analysts in different places, there are different people that are focused on different things, but as a general, like, here's how you make me successful as an analyst in the SOC. It's like, give me the data that I want. Let me delve deeper and deeper and deeper, and then let me do the thing I need to do. And I think that's useful. I'm going to switch to the question in just a second, if that's okay. But I want to. I just saw a thing, but I also want to address really quickly on the technology, the dissatisfaction, if I may. Just go kind of down to the bottom here on this. And it actually is going to relate to something else about why I think people are satisfied with the detection, the EXDR as well. At the bottom, packet analysis, AI, ML, frequency analysis on the network, full PCAP on the network deception. I think that there's a challenge currently around network investigations that is largely driven by everything being HTTPS. And I think that this is another benefit for the EDR, XDR tool, is that you're not blinded from the encryption that's happening on the network. And I think that this is, leave alone the AI ML. I already talked about that a little bit in terms of the dissatisfaction of analysts, but the network stuff, I think that there are great ways to use network telemetry. I think there are great ways to do detections off of network. I think that you can still do investigation in network information if you're correlating and watching traffic movement and so on. But I think that analysts really quickly feel like they hit a brick wall when they start to do an investigation, unless they have some sort of TLS intercept in place, which is getting more and more difficult to implement. And that's from a technical perspective, but also from a legal perspective, from an investigation, me getting authorization from my legal team to be able to address it. So
yeah. What about the clouds?
From a
Yeah,
Go
from
ahead.
the technology perspective, do you think that cloud is something that people is worried, and because it's not clear to me if cloud is being addressed in the XDR solutions, or it's something that people are treating as a separate thing?
Quite honestly, I have to say, and this is going to sound a little weird, but I think that the cloud actually makes things a little bit easier on security analysts in some ways, because it actually limits all the options of what we can see. And it's not good in all cases. But I think that because the cloud limits our ability to actually see things, that we can focus on the stuff that's available a little bit better. I do also think that the cloud providers have realized that like they need to offer security capability, and there's a bunch of stuff that's kind of like built in that you can just use. And so like I don't want to go too deep into the different products that are out there for this, but you know, you have like OpenSearch and Amazon, you have Sentinel and the Azure offering. And so it's like they're basically building those tools to be able to simplify analysis for analysts in cybersecurity at the front end. Now, it's frustrating for more complicated investigations, but it actually, in many ways, makes it somewhat easier for the simpler investigations, where it's just kind of like, here's your phishing routine, like we already figured that out. And then I think that the other thing that's happening is with some of the SOAR and cloud native SIM utilities, they're pretty much like, here's all we got. And there's not a lot of flexibility. There are not a lot of options. Here's your offering in the cloud environment. I think that,
Chris.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chris. No, we have a question here in the chat. It's from Eric Toyo. He's asking, what do you think about the lack of motivation / time from the leadership related to the staff and the increase of burnouts out there?
Let me actually switch to something in here, and I'm gonna have to search for it because there's a chart on retention. So there's a chart on retention, and I think that I found the one that I was looking for. What is the most effective you've found? Most effective method you've found? Here, this is the one that I want to retain SOC employees. And I want to answer this again, I want to base it on the survey stuff from Eric's question, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. The most effective method that they've found to retain SOC employees exceeding money was career progression. Career progression is here, this one here in terms of the answers. Single most effective method. Now, what that says to me is that people who work in this space are interested in continuing to grow. And they want to feel like when they go to work, they're growing and developing. And if you offer them an opportunity to change and adjust what they're doing, it probably addresses the burnout concern, which is, look, I'm just doing the same thing over and over and over again, and I don't see progress. And even if the individuals don't see progress within the organization, I do kind of feel like if they see the progress in themselves, there's an ongoing value to that individual to where they won't leave. And let me also address this two other ways, and this is my opinion type stuff. The first one is what motivates people is money and glory. And if you can give people more money, great. If you can't give people more money, you have to look for a way to make them feel like what they're doing is good and glorious. And there are different approaches to this, but it's usually about showing them that you trust them, showing them that they're empowered to do work. And I really think that this is a thing that really drives burnout, is if people feel like they can't do what they want to do to make a difference, burnout happens. If people feel like they're empowered and they're able to actually make substantive change in the environment, they tend not to get burned out. And
but not despite of the money, right?
Well, it's like here's the thing, is that the money is a marginal thing. If someone said to you, "Hey, I'm going to give you a job and I'm going to pay you double what you're earning now, and as a SOC manager, I can only give you a 5% increase," I can't compete with that. I can't compete with you getting double. And what do I say that? Congratulations. I hope that the new place is hiring because I want to come join you. You know what I mean? But it's like at a certain point though, the money kind of starts to top out. And it's not worth it for me to take 5% more to go deal with some unknown aggravation when I feel like the stuff that I do here is good. Like we're making progress. I'm getting better. I feel like every day that I go to work, I get a little bit better. That's what tends to diminish the burnout, even if it is a very grueling, very difficult work environment.
Yeah.
Money is great.
Money is great. I agree. Look, we are going to the end. Before we finish here, we just unfortunately we have no time, but we have some questions coming. I'm absolutely shocked here because
there is one in the chat. There is one in the chat about open source, free tools, SOCs protecting against supply chain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What to think to finish?
Yeah, so let me quickly address the supply chain. One of the things that I actually really advocate that people do is assess software that's coming in to their environment. And I think that if somebody was actually looking at, because they mentioned the SolarWinds, if they actually looked at that change that happened for the SolarWinds update, somebody was actually just doing a delta, like let's do sort of this change. All of a sudden there was a new domain name that was connected to that had never connected to before. It did some weird checks on the file system for file hashes, which actually, if you looked up what those file hashes were that were hard coded in the code, they referenced antivirus software. Why is SolarWinds checking to see if specific antivirus software is on the file system? It's like there were a couple of behaviors that in retrospect were pretty weird, that all of a sudden it was a new change. So that's one aspect that you could look for, is just the change in behavior over time as how the software that you're deploying is in there. Okay. The other part is the aspect of open source. I love open source software. You do have to be careful from a supply chain inclusion of that, because the flexibility to include stuff is there, and it's a challenge. But this is something that I think it's a topic for a different day, quite honestly, on like the paradigm of open source versus commercial tools. And if you do have commercial tools, open source ones are nice verification, because all tools really are kind of broken in some ways, and having a secondary tool for corroboration or a second opinion is really useful.
And so, why not coexist? Why not coexist, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
okay, Chris,
I put my LinkedIn in there. That was the last link that I just put in there if people want to connect there.
Oh, okay, I put here in the chat. All right.
Yeah, great.
Okay, Chris. I cannot thank you enough. Thank you. Really was awesome.
Thank
and
you.
hopefully we can have a new chance to chat more in the next opportunity.
Thank you to
I
everybody who
love,
tuned in. Appreciate it.
yeah, we love to have you here today. See you in the next session. Next session is planned for September 6th, if not wrong. It's my colleague Kate will come to talk about our new launch, the Vision One endpoint protection. So that's the next session, right? Okay, Chris, thank you. See you soon.
See you soon. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.